Welcome to a Monstrous Musing episode of the Monster Movie Happy Hour, in which we chat with a special guest. And occasionally we give Mary useless life advice. I'm one of your hosts, Dave Geister, longtime monster kid. I'm joined by our intrepid international man of mystery, Scott Cheeseborough.
So says you.
So says me. In the heart of our trio, Mary Challman is unfortunately unavailable tonight. She does send her joyous greetings to our special guest, Mr. Christopher Mihm. And Minnesota's own Christopher Mihm is the writer, director, and producer of nearly 20 films of the, what would you say, Chris, the Mihmiverse?
Yeah, a fan long ago coined the term Mihmiverse, and it stuck.
Yeah, I like it myself. And I'm taking this directly from your website, so I hope you don't mind, but it says right here, a series of award-winning, loosely interlinked, feature-length films, which pay homage to 1950s era drive-in cinema. Seems
exactly.
Appropriate. Yeah. So welcome. Thanks for hanging out with us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
And is that how you would describe, I realize when you're talking about a large volume of films like we are.
Oh, now Scott's breaking up. Folks, as Mr. Cheeseborough put it a short time ago, the internet gods are capricious, and right now they're having their fun with us. So while we're waiting for Scott to return out of the ether.
But is that how you would describe it? Oh.
There we go.
Oh, we lost you, Scott. We lost you for a moment there.
Yeah, well, I kept on talking for a long time, so.
Yeah, good luck.
I don't know. I if this continues to happen throughout, I guess I would say just move on without me, because I don't want to be everybody's waiting on me. That's ridiculous.
No, but I think you were asking.
What I was asking was, if you did not describe your films as the Mihmiverse, how would you describe them otherwise? If you had to describe them.
Yes.
Well, the sort of term Mihmiverse really was coined as a way to encompass the entirety of the sort of universe of the films. When I started was 2006, I released a movie called The Monster Phantom Lake. And at the time I thought that'd be it. I'd just make the one movie. Sure. And then I made another one in the same style. And I thought, okay, well, I'll link it into this one and use some of the characters that we liked from the first one. Again, each time thinking this would be the last movie I ever made. But then I made a third one and I tied that in, and then a fourth and a fifth. And the ball kept rolling, and it ended up being this weird shared universe of cheesy monster movies, basically, like retro cheesy monster movies. And so it became this shared universe, which was never my original intention, but it just kind of happened because I kept making these same style films, and I'd find, a throwaway line from something I wrote from one movie. I'd be like, I'm going to follow up on that. Yep. I said something weird about, a particular location, and I'm just going to use that for a future film, or literally a throwaway line about a creature or something, and be like, well, I got to make that movie now. And it just became a thing. So the Mihmiverse itself is just is shorthand to describe sort of like all the creatures and people and overlapping events. And I've built all my movies to be standalone, right? Mm-hmm. But you can see any one of them and generally not be lost. But if you've seen more than one, you start catching on to the little things that are now thrown in for the people who've seen a bunch of them. Sure. So it's, but when I sort of describe to people what the shorthand I use when I'm trying to describe the kinds of movies I make, if I'm at like a convention or an event or something, is I always say they're new, old, good, bad movies. Mm-hmm. Because they're new, as in they've been made in the last 20 years, but they're made to look old, and they're good movies, I think, but they're also kind of made to be good, bad movies. They're meant to be cheesy, they're meant to be goofy, they're meant to, just have fun, and they're low budget. I mean, non-existent budget half the time, but they're low budget and just goofy, and the monsters sometimes are made out of household items, that kind of thing. Yeah. So that's the quick way I describe the movies. But again, like I said in the little description, it's kind of like they're tributes to the drive-in cinema of the 50s.
So would you say keeping that in mind, would you say that the films are, at least to pick one name out of the air, sort of in the mold of like a Burt I. Gordon sort of movies?
Yeah, oh yeah. Actually, Burt I. Gordon is one of my absolute favorite filmmakers of that era, partially because he's from the upper Midwest. He's originally from Wisconsin and then moved to Minnesota, was doing commercial work before going out to LA and just apparently knocking on some exec's door and saying, I want to make a movie. And they let him.
Sure.
Different time.
Seriously.
But he was a special effects guy, and he always, he's Mr. B.I.G. Everything he did was a lot of times making things blow up, right, and get really big. And so he's one of my favorites. So I definitely think of myself not as a spiritual successor, but not of the level he was, because he had, money and
lots more money. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great connection, quite frankly. We've got a handful of folks in the upper Midwest who fit in that realm. I'm trying to think of the name of the gentleman, Giant Spider Invasion with Alan Hale Jr. Also in Wisconsin.
Tom Rebane or something like that.
Rebane. Yeah, Rebane. Yeah, exactly. Who's still alive? We have a friend who keeps insisting he can connect us with him, but he said, you got to be kind of careful what you talk to him about, because he's kind of cranky now. I'm sure.
I get that after making movies for so long. I totally get the crankiness that comes with it. It's just a thing that you eventually, after years and years of all the reviews you get online, especially, it starts to eat away at your soul just a little bit every time.
I can't imagine. I mean, when you're limited in resources and you're not trying to make an Oscar-winning film, and to have people, pile on you or criticize you for, this looked less than stellar. It's like, what do you expect?
Exactly. I had $5,000 to spend on the entire movie. What am I can only do so much.
And exactly. Christopher, they're all extremely entertaining.
That's all I go for, is entertaining.
Yeah, I've never regretted a moment spent watching your movies. I own a few of them. And in fact, Scott and I were at the Heights Theater years ago when you did the release for the
double feature.
Double feature.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, or late night double feature.
Yeah, it was a late night double feature.
Yeah, exactly. And I have to admit, the People in the Walls is one of my favorites.
Good. That's basically a Twilight Zone episode. Is the way I wrote it.
Happy vibes there, and you've got the really cool stop motion creature by Norman
Yeend.
Yeah, yep. So I just rewatched that one today. Actually, I watched both of the late night double feature. And your wife, of course, is the star of the first one of those two.
Right.
I just started to realize, man, she's in a lot of those movies. She's a really good sport. And, and she's very entertaining,
I think some of it is just, trying to maintain this, which is, it takes a lot of time and energy and effort and, family time and all that stuff. Yep. If I sort of didn't bring the family along, I wouldn't be able to do this as long as I could.
Yep.
And I actually have a really fun story about her involvement. When we made the Monster Phantom Lake, she was kind of, supportive but hands off, right? Sure. And then she started making, because she had done acting in high school, and she was like, I did some acting in high school. If you're ever looking for someone to be in a movie, and I was like, oh, okay, all right. And I started putting her in a couple movies, but when we reached movie 4, it's a movie called Terror from Beneath the Earth, right? And it's about this bat monster in a cave. And I was telling her about it. And I said, I'm going to make this movie about a bat monster in a cave. And she's like, well, where are you going to get a cave? I mean, where are you going to shoot in a cave? I get all the other stuff is in the woods or whatever. But and I said, well, here's the thing. We have this room in our house. That's where our furnace is. And it's mostly unfinished. Or it's pretty much unfinished. And it's mostly used for storage. I said, well, I'm going to paper mache a cave into the basement. I will never forget this, because she looked at me. She's like, no, you're not doing that. And I'm like, no, listen. She's like, no, you're not doing it. I said, no, listen, you're the lead. And she's like, okay, when do we start?
Huh.
That's wonderful.
That's great.
So, okay, you've got to tell us. Is there still a cave in your basement?
No, but it has gone up and down a couple times in a few different movies. And actually, one of my favorite stories about that cave was the first year we did it for that movie, Terror from Beneath the Earth. It was up, we were shooting more in the winter, and that was part of the reason why we were shooting inside, was because of the winter. It's Minnesota, it's cold. We did do a movie out in the cold, and I regretted it, even though I'm born and raised here. I'm like, why did I do this? This is awful. But we're shooting this movie in the cave, and of course, that's the year that the furnace decides to die.
Oh,
wow.
So I had to get a guy come out, and of course, the moment he walks in to fix, he walks in the door, and I'm like, I start by just saying, so before you go downstairs, and I'm sure he hears that all the time, right? And he's like, oh God, what is it? What's down there?
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, so before you go downstairs, there's a cave down there that I built for this movie I'm making. And he's like, okay. And he went downstairs, and he just seemed scared the whole time. And he seemed really freaked out by it. And he got his work done really fast and got the hell out. And then a week later, it died again. So I don't think he actually finished the job. He did it just to get working. He's like, I'm out of here. And then the next guy came, and I said again, before you go downstairs, and he was like, oh, what? I'm like, no, there's this cave. And I explained it to him, and he was really excited. And he ended up spending all this time there, working on the furnace, but asking me a million questions. And he was super excited. He actually came to the premiere, and he was like, that was so cool.
That's great.
That was just... it was ridiculous, but of course, that was the year the furnace had to go out twice.
That's
a great story. I like that one. That's pretty good.
I love it. Jeez. Well, there's so much we could talk about. Wow. Okay, let's go back to the very beginning, if you will.
Yes.
So, Christopher, where were you raised? As a child.
I grew up in Minneapolis,
okay.
Sort of in the southwestern corner, sort of walking distance from both Richfield and Edina.
Yep.
So I ended up spending a lot of Fridays with the family at the old France Avenue Drive-In.
Okay.
Over in was that Edina? I suppose it was Edina, not Bloomington. It was Edina.
I think it was in Edina, but I'm not.
Yeah,
sure.
because off France and 494. So we go there all the time growing up, and I lived there until. I moved out after high school and moved to St. Paul, and then back to Minneapolis, and now I'm out in the suburbs.
Yep. Well then, I'm just going to make a blanket assumption that you're somewhere within the approximate age category that Scott and I identify with.
Give or take 7 years.
Right. Yeah. So as a child, did you catch Horror Incorporated on Saturday nights? Coming out of
I would occasionally, yeah.
Okay.
I think my association with the cheesy old movies came more from my dad, because he was a huge fan of them, and so as soon as he could get a VCR in the early '80s, maybe even late '70s. So we had a Betamax. I mean, the top loader Beta. He'd start renting movies, and he'd start renting all the movies he saw when he was a kid. He's from a small town way out west in Minnesota, and we'd watch all these cheesy movies. And so I was really, I ended up seeing a lot of, they were never the good ones either. He always liked the worst of the worst, right? But it was an interesting cinematic education. Growing up with sort of Star Wars, but then also, This Island Earth.
Although I have to say, I don't know if you have found the same is true for yourself, but maybe my judgment is not as harsh as it was when I was in my 20s and 30s. But a lot of films that have this reputation as being really terrible, when I viewed them now in the past 5 or 6 years, I look at them and go, okay, well, this is obviously not a A grade movie and maybe not even a B grade movie, but it's not as harshly terrible as people have judged it. The most recent example I can come up with of that is, and no, it's not a or B grade movie, is The Killer Shrews, which I recently watched.
So do I.
And it was really entertaining. And yeah, I mean, you can tell that things are not really shrews, but it's like, okay, it's like Dave and I have had this discussion about a lot of genre films that you can see the seams and the costumes and that kind of thing. It's like a radio play in that you suspend disbelief. You see these things and you just go, yes, I know this is on a soundstage, or yes, I know that's a guy in a neoprene suit. But you just suspend disbelief. And if you go with it instead of center on it, it's like, it's still entertaining. It still tells the story as it was intended, and you still enjoy it.
Exactly.
You're not going, this is stupid, this is miserable. Why am I subjecting to myself to this?
I sometimes think the more fake it looks, the almost easier it becomes to suspend disbelief. It's like that uncanny valley thing. The closer you get to realism, the more obvious it starts to feel. And so you get these hyper realistic CGI worlds where it's like, okay, they're clearly on a soundstage, right? But it's so close to reality that you can tell it's off, it's wrong.
Sure.
Yeah.
And
give me that slightly artificial, or maybe entirely artificial world. We just recently watched Haunted Palace, Roger Corman's Lovecraft movie, basically. The entire movie is studio bound. I mean, the exterior shots are so obviously shot in a studio. That's one thing I love about it. It's like watching a play, as Scott said. There's the artifice. It basically begs you to say, just look at this as for lack of a better word, as an art form, and just enjoy it. And I love the handmade quality. I always have.
And I always love when you can see when they have say like a water tank or something, you could totally tell where the back wall is.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And you can see the steam,
sky.
And it's like there's something about that I find it's like charming in a way that like theater, that it becomes much easier to sort of be along for the ride for me. I don't know. I can sort of put myself in it because I'm, I know it's actors. I know it's a play. I know it's a movie. I know that that's very fake, but I love too, as a filmmaker, to watch and try to figure out the things they were doing at a time when they had to really just be like, well, how do we even do that?
Yeah.
That was the thing with Burt Gordon, is that he was making up a lot of these techniques as he went, because he didn't know. And he was just, he'd do these things and it was like, I don't know how to do that, but I'll figure it out. And he did. And they don't always work, but you could tell it wasn't like just a software suite he could pull off of, a download somewhere and suddenly have.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was like, no, he had to figure it all out from scratch, and it didn't always work, but it didn't matter. That was the fun. That was the best part about it.
The fun. There's a huge element of fun. With our Monster Mover Happy Hour crew, we sort of run the whole spectrum in terms of the movies that we enjoy watching, and sometimes they are exceedingly grim with no sense of humor, and sometimes and oftentimes with really well conceived and well realized special effects. That's one experience, but by and large, we keep coming back to a lot of the stuff from the 60s, a lot of those Hammer films, Corman films, obviously Burt I. Gordon. Yeah, well, the word I keep coming back to is that handmade quality.
Yeah.
I guess I really appreciate that.
Well, and I like the weight that sort of, like you said, handmade stuff has. Where especially with modern CGI, you can sort of tell they're not looking at anything, right?
Yep.
And I like the idea of just sort of the physicality of these things being real.
Right.
Yeah, I think of all the stunts we've seen in our youth where somebody literally had to jump off a building and land.
Right.
And so there's a limit to what they're able to do safely, but they're
Right.
obviously falling through space and crashing into something. A perfect example is that scene in Scott. You might need to help me here. I think it's the first of the Hammer Frankenstein movies where Dr. Frankenstein pushes the man through the banister, and you see the shot from above, and you see the stuntman. It's all one hit, and he lands on his neck, bam, when he lands.
Yeah.
And I think, oh my God, I mean, that's real. Anytime I watch a CGI sequence in a movie with characters leaping from building to building, I'm just completely out of the movie now. Like you say, there's no way there's no way it can be real. And so give me something that looks a little clunky, but it's real, and I'm there. Give me a puppet that doesn't quite function as well as it should.
Right.
But it's alive. It's there,
I'm pretty sure I made that movie several times.
Well,
it's one of the things I guess I just totally appreciate,
I suspect that, you have never had the situation where you've had a film in production and then your actors have a situation where when the film is completed, they're shocked or disappointed by the completed project, like, oh, that's what the monster looks like, or this is what I was pretending was terrifying.
Right.
Or,
No, they know.
Like, for example, the movie that I always think of, and it's a movie I love,
Oh, I know what you're going
is The Giant Claw. These actors made that film and had no idea what it was they were supposed to be seeing. They had a general idea, but then when the film was completed and edited, they were like, they were embarrassed, apparently. But I can see why they were embarrassed, but I also at the same time really like that film.
Oh,
Yeah, I do too.
I tell you what, if I was in a plane and that googly-eyed thing came out of the sky, first of all, I'd probably have a heart attack.
Yes.
Well, I'm not going to say, God, I really wish it looked more like a pteranodon. It's like, no, this thing is huge. It's as big as a battleship. It's
well,
exactly.
Of course, the thing is, at least I've heard, was that they originally thought they were going to have Ray Harryhausen doing all that stuff. Well, if you go from Ray Harryhausen to what they got, I can see where they were like, oh,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, it's basically the marionette on steroids,
Yeah.
Right.
So, Scott and I both every now and then peruse eBay, hoping to find a model of that, that won't break the bank. Because it's like that'll be an awesome plastic kit to put together.
So, that with that in mind, when you have when you've made films or you've had pre-production and you have had to come up with some concept for a creature, have you ever had to go back and study how they've done certain effects in films, and then tried to duplicate them? Or
I know to a certain extent we have in a little bit. I usually I have this local guy named Mitch Gonzalez who's done a lot of my monster masks and creatures, and he and I have gone back and tried to figure out ways they used to do things, because we try to recreate as much as we can. Obviously, there's some things you just have to do digitally, like compositing, but we're still compositing physical models digitally, right? Yep. And so there were some things, especially with my movie The Giant Spider, that we went back and really tried to do mixes of different things, right? Where we had an actual physical tarantula. That's actually the family tarantula that's still around.
That's where it came from.
Yeah. It was my son's pet, and actually, the moment I bought it for him, I was like, I know what the star of my next movie is going to be. So we just, we did that, and that was kind of just like a blue screen kind of an effect, a green screen thing. But then we have like a giant leg in a scene, and Mitch figured out how to make a giant spider leg out of tomato cages and fur.
That's because I was just watching it the other day. I thought, okay, that's pretty cool. How did they make the leg?
It was two tomato cages covered in fake fur. And then we had this. What we did, and the things with Mitch and I, which is really nice, is that whenever I come up with a concept for a movie, I'll be like, okay, so here's what here's what I'm thinking. Here's what the monster is going to be, and it instantly starts the wheels turning in his head. And usually within hours, I've got sketches of things he wants to do. And we decided very early on to do. There's a movie called The Black Scorpion. I'm sure you guys have seen it. And there's this thing in that movie where we keep getting this close-up shot of the scorpion's face before it kills things.
Yeah,
we both thought that was just hilarious, but also awesome. And so we're like, we have to do that in The Giant Spider. So he went off and he's like, well, I think it should be like a puppet. It's got to have like moving eyes and all this stuff. And I'm like, let's do it. And so he went off and he did all this research into how to create puppets and make the mouth, like the little mouth open up and stuff. And it's one of my favorite effects we've ever done, is that goofy ass spider face.
It works so well. Where'd the puppet end up?
Mitch still has it. He has a very cool little menagerie in his house, and I have one in mine of just props and masks and monsters that have built up over time. And actually,
there's that great portrait of you with a lot of the creatures that have appered in a lot of your films. That's a great picture. I call
that my Jim Henson shot. I saw this. I always loved the Muppets and Jim Henson and just the puppetry and all that stuff. And that's part of the reason we've thrown puppets in some of my movies is just because I've always loved that stuff. And there's these great pictures of Jim Henson surrounded by Muppets.
Yeah.
And I was like, I have enough monsters now. I should do something like that where it's me surrounded by my monsters. And it worked out as a cool concept that we did as kind of like a headshot, basically, because headshots for me was like, well, my headshot tells you nothing because I'm not really an actor per se.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, how about I always surround myself with monsters? That tells you everything you need to know, but then also shows off the cool monsters.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you do appear in your movies frequently.
Oh yeah, I got to do my Hitchcock thing, right? Early on, it was just like, well, we need actors, and I don't want to find more people, so I'll just do it. And then over time, I started writing characters occasionally for myself just to have fun. In fact, I have a movie coming out at the end of June that was postponed because of COVID, that I play actually like a large role in it, just because I'm playing a character from I'm playing the drive-in owner from the Giant Spider. But he's become the mayor now, so he's got a much larger role, and it was actually really fun just because I got to play a jerky politician, which was actually a very fun role to play.
Oh, good. But it is the same character. He's no longer. He's no longer.
Yeah, he's become the mayor because he used the publicity from the Giant Spider attack to get rich, basically.
Oh, wow.
And then there's even a line in there where I'm like, so I did what all rich men do: run for office. So like it became a thing. So he's just so with that movie in particular, because that was supposed to be movie 15. I did it as a little like tip of the hat to all the previous 14. So there's references to like everything throughout. And so I thought, well, that'd be a nice little reference to the Giant Spiders. That Giant Spider attack keeps sort of coming up as, a big thing that happened in this county.
Yeah.
I love the fact that it did happen. It's not like, they suddenly forgot that it ever happened.
Yeah.
No. It plays a lot into the plot and just what's happened we call it Phantom Lake County, in Phantom Lake County since then.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah, it was really fun to play it. But I don't know. It's funny. I write these words, but I have like more difficulty memorizing them than anyone, strangely, even though I wrote them. So I don't know.
Here's a question for you. Some people, some script writers are very adamant that an actor needs to say things exactly as they were written. As a filmmaker, where do you come down on that?
With my movies, I'm pretty much a despot when it comes to that. It's like, say it as I wrote it.
Wow.
Sometimes, yeah, I mean, sometimes part of the reason, though, we do that has more to do with the process of how we make the movies to get the sound to be decent. Is our crews end up being really small. Sometimes it's me and like a family member or a friend. It's like very small. Because again, the money's not there, so it's like you got to cut as many corners as possible. So we end up replacing all the audio after the fact. which actually gives me a little more leeway to be consistent in the audio levels and stuff. Because that's one of the things that early on I used to do. I went to college actually for audio recording and design, and I thought very early on, it was like, one of the things that I always feel like betrays an indie movie right off the bat is that it has awful sound, right?
Yeah.
People don't realize the sound is a bigger part of film than not. And so I always wanted to make sure my sound was very consistent and clear and, mastered, not for necessarily movie theaters, but for home video, because that's where I'm, hitting people is, DVD, Blu-ray, streaming, that kind of thing. I'm not going for theaters, although some theaters I do stuff, but I'm aiming for that. So it's mastered for that. So one of the reasons why I always keep people is like, well, if you go off the script too much, I may keep it, but when we re-record your audio later, you're going to have to read it off the script. And we try to keep notes, if like someone's just doing a line one particular way and it works just fine, it's not a big deal. And we try to record it that way. But if not, it's like, well, if you like not seeing your face when you're delivering lines and you just want to watch a bunch of people's reactions, feel free to stray as far as you want from the script. But when it comes down to it, we're going to go back to it because that's the way we do it. Yep. Early on, it was just that I was very much like, but I wrote it. It must be like that. And now it's actually like, well, it just has to be that way, or else the whole process, the way we do things, won't work. Or, like I said, you can usually tell if you're watching one of my movies and someone is talking, but you're looking at everyone's reaction to what they're saying, that they were having trouble getting the line. And so when editing, we're just going back and now we're just seeing how everyone's like, oh, and everyone's like, yeah. And then it finally cuts to them at the end of the line. Then you know that they were having trouble with it.
They get the one word. That's not unlike what the Italian directors, did for decades. I guess it makes sense technically.
Well, and I even paid homage to that because I did a movie 3 or 4 years ago called Guns of the Apocalypse.
Yes,
which was like I call it a spaghetti Midwestern, right? And it was supposed to be like an Italian film, right? Made here in the Midwest.
I've only seen the previews. I still need to see it.
Well, and see, the thing about that we did is that we had 90% of the audio replaced by other actors.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
But you'd have the 1 or 2 American actors like Clint Eastwood who would do his own audio, right? So we have 1 or 2 actors who got to have their own voices, but then everyone else was replaced. Like I did and my thing is I did all the main character's voice. And you had all these other actors who then replaced other actors. So you'd have one actor playing doing the body, but then they'd swap voices.
Yeah. Just to create a little more of that sense of the Oh, that's really cool.
And what's even weirder then too is like a lot of these actors were in several movies. So if you were used to them after seeing them in 4 or 5 movies, and suddenly it's like, wait a minute, that guy sounds like the other guy. This is so confusing.
Yeah.
So when you produce a film, I assume you have to, do you know right at the beginning before you start production what your budget is, or is it as money comes in some cases?
Usually, my attitude toward it has been that I usually have a general idea of how much that I think I can raise with just contributors, because my budgets are so dang low. Like the entirety of the films are, crowdfunded. And my attitude is like, if I really want to make a movie and I can't make enough crowdfunding, I'm just going to go into debt to make it happen. If it's important, like the Giant Spider ended up, it was a bigger movie, scope wise, and just, we shot in drive-ins in Wisconsin, and we had all these extras and classic cars, and there was a lot to that movie that cost way more than we got in contributions, and I just basically, paid out of pocket, and it all sort of comes out in the wash. But some of these smaller ones, it's like, well, if we have enough, we have enough. We might have more than we need, but it all kind of goes into like sort of a central fund that funds all the activities of, not just making the movies, but promoting them and putting them out. And just, there's so much that goes into, because I distribute them myself now too, and have for years that, it all kind of runs weirdly at even. but I do that on purpose just so that it's like, as long as it funds itself,
Yeah.
Sure.
and allows me to keep making movies, that's
Yeah.
all I care about.
Yeah.
Is just sort of like, I don't want to go and just constantly going into debt.
No,
But if I
no.
can run it even, I'm happy, because, you know, I have another side job, and, you know,
Mhm.
I'm married and my wife has a job, and, you know, we do okay. But I'm not pushing to, you know, make $1 million. I just want to be able to not, like I said, go into debt and saddle my kids with not being able to, like,
Right.
you know, eat.
Absolutely.
Right.
But as long as they pay for themselves and I can keep making more, I'm a success as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. So would you say that of your films, then do the films generally have about the same budget, or do they vary
Yeah, oh
widely?
yeah. They're. I mean, it's kind of normalized in a weird way, where it's like I can. There's a great group of people who I can sort of depend on, that are just big fans, that always, you know, kick in their $25. And if they don't, you know, they usually make it up eventually, or I don't know. I haven't lost a lot of fans. I mean, there's like a core group of them that really always
Sure.
are just like trying to keep me going and make more stuff, and they're sort of the big consumers of it. And then you get the random people here and there who just want to see their name in lights, or, you know, they're just maybe just discovered it or whatever. So
Uh-huh.
I have sort of a baseline that I can more or less depend on with everyone. It's not huge, but if I sort of start there with when I'm writing a script and developing something, that's usually the best way to go. And then if I want to embellish and I'm like, ooh, I could do this, I may have to accept that I may have to pay for it out of pocket, but that's fine. Because again, it all kind of works itself out in the end.
Well, that brings me to the next question, which is what are you working on at the moment?
So, because of the pandemic, it got a little weird, right?
Yeah.
In 2018, I started shooting, I wrote this script called That Which Lurks in the Dark, which was going to be a little bit of a Mimiverse, Lovecraftian tentacle kind of thing, right?
Okay.
I wrote that, and I was going to shoot it in 2019, but everything kind of fell apart with that because I was having trouble with scheduling, and it didn't work out. So as a result, I ended up throwing together this other movie called The Phantom-like Kids and the Beast Walks Among Us,
Yeah.
which is it's basically kind of a Scooby-Doo movie.
Yep.
All my kids have grown up in this movie making world, and they all act, and they all wanted to be in something, and they all had been previously, and they had been sort of like, hey, let's do another movie. And so it became, as that one fell apart, I realized, okay, well, I have to get something going, because I try to release something every year, and I have every single year since 2006. I was like, well, okay, I got to do something. I know I have access to my kids. Let's do this movie. So I wrote that movie, and in the summer 2019, we filmed it, and I put it together, and it was going to release in April of 2020, but then everything went to hell. And the funny thing is I was then able to start shooting That Which Lurks in the Dark in early 2020, but that got shut down again. So my release got pushed off. My movie I've been trying to make for 2 years got shut down again. And I'm like, okay. So I took advantage of, again, being sort of stuck in a quarantine with my kids. And we're like, well, let's make another Phantom-like Kids movie just because it'll be our quarantine movie. So we came up with this idea, and we shot it, and I released it like 2 days before Christmas last year. So I ended up keeping the one movie a year. And had I not done that, I still could have released the other one just digitally and not in theaters. And that's actually the one that I'm now releasing. The one from last year, I'm going to release here at the end of June digitally. And
the title of that one is?
That's the Phantom. The one from last year was The Phantom-like Kids and the Unseen Invasion, which is about invisible aliens. And then the one that I'm finally releasing is The Phantom-like Kids and the Beast Walks Among Us. And so because it's still in like this really weird place with things are getting better, but I wouldn't really be able to get to anything with a lot of outside people. That I just the kids and I came up with this great idea for a third Phantom-like Kids movie. That is, it's called. It has one of my favorite titles because it's the most ridiculous title I've ever come with.
Say it out loud.
Yeah, it's The Phantom-like Kids and the Day the Earth Abruptly Almost Ended.
Yeah, like abruptly almost. That's just
abruptly almost ended. And it's kind of a kaiju movie a little bit.
Okay.
There's some giant monsters, and you know how the kids and the local sheriff are dealing with it, and it's actually really funny and really fun and kind of bizarro. And I figured that would be the thing we could do now, and then ideally, as everything gets better and better, next year we start going into something else. And I have a really pretty cool idea actually that plays again into foreign films, non-English speaking films from the 50s and 60s that were then overdubbed. I have this really fun idea I want to do, but it's all just going to depend on where things are in October.
So have you at least for the meantime, have you given up on your Lovecraftian film then?
Yeah, it's just what I did is I officially shut it down, but it's still there. It's I really like the script, and I ended up shooting like a third of it, but because everything keeps getting like pushed off, it's like none of that footage is going to work. I don't even know if like all the actors will still be here by the time I can finally get back to it.
Sure.
So I plan on eventually coming back to it. It's just I had contributors and stuff that I paid everyone back and offered refunds, and a lot of those folks were just like, just roll it over into whatever you're doing. It doesn't matter. We'll work it out then. And a couple of people were like, "Oh, this is the best thing. I need $100," and I'd given you $100, and I'm like, well, it's yours. It's just literally been sitting in an account waiting to be used, and I can't use it. So here it is. So it was like, and that was another thing that was really nice, having a lot of contributors who were really cool. Like, we understand this wasn't your fault, and we just want to help you out and keep you going. So just take that money and put it into the new one.
Nice.
So, yeah.
You really do have a nice, loyal fan base.
Yeah, and they're all really, really nice people that are just, I don't know, they're generous and sweet. And like, if I put out like questions of like, hey, what would you guys want to see? They're always, out there up front. I don't get a lot of complainers or people who are just like, I really wish you would have done this differently. I don't get that. I mean, you get that on Amazon, but those are people who are like, I watched 5 minutes, worst thing ever.
Yeah.
How can you tell in 5 minutes?
Suck the life out of out of any project that you've labored on. Just read Amazon reviews. And
seriously,
it's not pretty. No.
The internet is both wondrous and terrible. So
it truly is. Social media is the greatest and worst thing that ever happened to humanity.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like this stark line, between horrible and wonderful.
Yeah,
exactly.
In between there.
No, it seems like it's not.
Yeah, it's only extremes. There is no happy medium. It really, it's either like, I mean, you read the reviews of my movies, and it's either this is the worst thing ever, it looks like it was made by grade schoolers, or I really love these movies. He really got it. So it was never just like, it was okay. I thought it was fun. It's never that.
Honestly, Christopher, and that right there, to me, is a token or a testament rather to how well you've tapped a particular nerve. The negative reviewers are never going to get that. They're never going to understand that. So I
just like, if someone's going to give me a negative review, is that as long as it's well written and it makes me laugh, that's fine. Like if it's a good bad review, where it's just like they rip me and they make it funny, I'm usually like, okay, that's a good way to say it. But if it's just like, sucks, I watched 5 minutes, what's the point of that? I mean, if you hated it in 5 minutes, why do you have to go online and tell everybody that you hated it? Oh, good for you. Thank you.
I get it, but whenever I come across a review of something like that, I immediately click on that person's profile and see what else they reviewed, and inevitably, it's like they hate everything.
Oh yeah, this damn ladle I bought.
Exactly.
I thought it would be shinier. It's not shiny enough. 1 star.
It's rarely just movies. They're complaining about everything. So.
Everything.
It's like their hobby.
I don't understand that mindset.
No, not at all. Hey, I see also that you have a podcast. In fact, I know you do because I've listened to some of it recently.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So we used to have another podcast called the Mimiverse Bonfire Podcast, which we would start about, which came out of just, friends of mine from a long time who've been helping me with the movies. We'd sit around bonfires in the summer, right? Which is what you do in Minnesota. You got to take advantage of the nice weather when that week comes around.
Yeah.
And and we would, talk about movies. And one of my friends was like, "Hey, we should just record these and release it as a podcast." And I was like, "Let's do that." And that lasted for like 6 years. But then those guys, it's just like it became too much, right? Because there are people who've been involved in like one of the hosts like is in a band that's actually doing really well, so they're playing out a lot, and it just became too much for them to do. And so I started just doing another one called the Mimiverse Monthly Audio Cast, which was just me talking about sort of everything that's happening, but then also adding extra content. For a long time, I had a guy who would come on and just give sort of cool reviews of like hard to find old movies. And like one of the things I started doing now is something I'm calling an oral history of the Mimiverse, which is just, I get a lot of people asking me about, saying you should write a book about all your experiences making these movies, because I have a lot of really fun stories just from all the years of doing this and meeting people and doing really crazy stuff and having fun adventures. And I always tell my kids that I'm like, all your friends may be like, "Oh, we went to Italy every summer." None of them are going to be able to tell the stories you guys can tell. And so I started doing this thing where I'm just sort of telling the history of everything in the hopes that eventually I'd be able to type it up into a book or something. But then also we do this, I started doing this thing called Atomic Tales with a writer friend of mine named Steve Sullivan, who writes a lot of sort of monster kid fiction, right? And he started doing this cool thing called Atomic Tales that monthly I'll basically read it, but we read it almost like a halfway point between just reading it and doing it as a radio play, where we have different actors playing different characters when they have dialogue, and then one narrator doing it with some sound effects. It's pretty cool, actually. We've got 8 episodes in on that. So, I mean, it's always just extra material to, for the people who really like the movies, but also monster kid types who want to, listen to Atomic Tales and just check out some of the goofy stuff that we've done to put out these underground films.
Well, I don't know if you could tell, but as soon as you started talking about it, little antennas popped up from both my head and I think Scott's as well, because it's like right in our wheelhouse. That's that's the world we live in. We love that stuff.
Exactly.
Check it out.
Yeah. And I want to share one story because I didn't earlier, but this is one of my favorite things. Yep. You're talking about, because you brought up the giant spider invasion. This is one of my favorite stories. When we were making The Giant Spider in 2012, we were shooting a scene at a drive-in in Chautauqua, Wisconsin, called the Stardust Twin. And the owner of the drive-in was really cool and really supportive about us coming out there and shooting out there. And he contacted the local car clubs, the Classic Car Club, to come out and bring their classic cars for the scene where the spider attacks the drive-in.
Yep.
And the owner was super nice. It was a gorgeous summer day, and he's like, I'll I'm gonna offer hot dogs and chips to everybody so that everyone here on set can eat, and we'll, as we're setting up and get everything set, and then we'll shoot the movie. And he was super nice because he just did that, didn't make me pay him or anything. He was just like, "Yeah, come on out." So Mitch Gonzalez, who I mentioned before, and I were in the concession stand while a couple of the production folks were just getting cars lined up just right. And as we're standing in line to get our hot dog, this guy taps me on the shoulder. And I turn around, and it's this sort of grizzled guy, and he's like, "Hey," you ever heard of that giant spider invasion movie? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, "I was in that movie." I was like, "What?" He's like, "I was a teenager. I was in it. I was on a baseball diamond when the spiders attacked." I'm like, "That is the coolest thing ever." And Mitch and I just started geeking out, and he was super nonplussed about it. He's like, "Yeah, well, I've never even seen it." I was like, "But this is amazing." He's like, "I just want my truck in your movie. I love my truck and I want it in your movie." I'm like, "Well, you got to be sitting in that truck." He's like, "I don't care." I'm like, "You have to sit in that truck because you can then be the only person in history who can say, I've been in 2 giant spider movies filmed in Wisconsin." And he's like, "All right, I'll do it."
That's great. That is a great story.
Because he was so grizzled too. He's like, "I've never even seen it." It's like, okay.
That's
we
funny.
we totally geeked out. We're like, that is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would have too.
Oh man. Well, Christopher, this has been fun. Well, we should probably call it quits. But I guess for the folks who are listening and or watching, where would you direct them if they want to be involved in the Mimiverse?
I mean, obviously, I always tell people to go to my website is probably the hub for everything. It's my production company, sainteuphoria.com, which not everyone can spell. So I just tell people, go to thegiantspider.com and it'll get you there. Otherwise, you can just find my stuff on, some of it's available to watch on Amazon. You can, buy DVDs and Blu-rays from Amazon. You can buy them straight from me. I prefer people buy them straight from me if you're an old school type, just because the Amazon takes everything.
Yeah, folks.
And then we also
go directly to Christopher to get your copies of the movie. It's well worth it, and they are inexpensive. It's well worth it.
Right, and I'll sign anything you want for free.
That's awesome. Oh. Well, seriously, this has been a lot of fun, and maybe we can chat again sometime down the road here when you got something more to share with us.
Sounds good.
So, honestly, this has been a blast.
Yeah, thanks very much. We appreciate
thank you for having me. This is really fun.
taking some time out.
Yep.
Yeah, no problem.
And thanks for many entertaining hours watching.
Absolutely.
Immensely.
Yeah.
Hopefully more are coming. I'm working on it.
Okay, we're looking forward to it. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks.